So hello everyone that's here and welcome to this panel on monetizing your virtual events. I'm Hildrich, I'm the content director at the Virtual Events Institute, and I'll be moderating this discussion for the next 30 minutes. And for the start of the session, if you haven't already done it, can I ask you all to mute? Nearly everyone's done it. That's great, thank you very much. Me and the panelists will start off by addressing some of the key questions, and then we'll take questions from you attendees. So could I ask you to type your questions into the chat, and then when it's time to take questions from the delegates, I'll ask you to unmute yourself and you can ask your question. And now I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Sophie Ahmed. She's the co-founder and CEO of the Virtual Events Institute, and she's joined by Whitney. He's also a co-founder of the Virtual Events Institute and the CEO of 365 Media. So thanks very much for joining us, Sophie and RD. To get the ball rolling, I'd like to start by asking you both a question that comes up most frequently when events people get together. What new revenue streams are now available to us, and what can we actually sell now in terms of sponsorship revenue? RD, perhaps you'd like to start here.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and to share some of these ideas and to get a discussion going around this area. I don't think it's things that have suddenly become new to sell. I just think it's become obvious because of the pandemic. So we all got pretty comfortable in our relative spaces with live events and selling cement on a floor and selling sponsorship into a gathering of people, and people were pretty content with that, and there was no reason to stretch beyond that. But for the past since mankind started, we've been forming communities, and communities since the internet have created all kinds of revenue streams to be able to monetize. Content revenue streams, sponsorship revenue streams, online education revenue streams, job boards. We could talk about all different types of creative ways that communities can come together and monetize content by simply creating gravity between buyer and seller and between buyer and education.
Great, thanks very much. That's an interesting start. Sophie, I know that you also have picked up a huge array of ideas over the last few months with all the different people you've been talking to. So what would you like to add in terms of ideas for our delegates? What can they add to their inventory now they can't sell lanyards or square meters?
Well, I mean, to RD's point, in physical events, of course, we had all our inventory very much established, whether it was selling physical space and the concrete or physical lanyards or areas within an event, networking areas or conference areas and so on. But of course, with virtual events, it's very much dependent on the technology and the functionality that you can have. So work with your tech providers and understand what is available, then map out your inventory and map out your pricing, of course, within that. And some inventory that comes with virtual events are things such as TV style adverts. Of course, we're going much more towards TV style high-end production. So think to some really good adverts perhaps you've seen on a TV. Also, we have things such as speaking sessions, but within that much more analytics that you can monetize. So you can really delve into the analytics for your sponsors, such as how many people attended that session, how long did they stay, how many people tapped on them or went to their booth, and so on. And you can package that up after the event and sell that on as an upsell or within the original sell at a higher price. So they have all that data and analytics that perhaps wasn't available before. That's a new revenue stream. And then you have things such as virtual swag, where you could have a downloaded gated form where people have to provide their data, and you say, is it okay if we pass that data to the sponsor? And you generate direct leads and data and many other things. You've got gamification, you've got polls, so you've got all these different things. But the key thing is to really understand what your customers want, work with your tech providers to ensure they can deliver it, and really get your pricing right and ensure, price boldly. Don't think, it's a second best. Price boldly, because of course, once you set that price, that's your legacy cost. You can't really go backwards after that. So all those things to consider, but there is a huge range of inventory with polls and gamification, TV style ads, virtual swag, virtual booths, conference rooms, speaking sessions, and so on that you can really tap into.
Wow, that's fantastic. I hope everyone was taking notes there. That's just a huge number of ideas. I love the I love the term virtual swag, and obviously what a brilliant way to generate leads for your exhibitors. Thanks very much, Sophie. Of course, the other traditional revenue stream is from delegates. So I know back in April and May, lots of organisers gave their events away for free. That's clearly not sustainable, and actually, is it even necessary? RD, what's your thinking around whether or not to charge delegates to attend virtual events?
Well, it all comes down to whether the content is nice to have or need to have. Many of us in different professions rely on particular information to stay compliant, to do better in our job, do better in our career, help our company advance. And if that information can help us sell more, can help us connect better to the next opportunity, or help us stay in compliance and stay out of trouble, then people will absolutely pay for that information. I like to go back, and think about, where the ideal revenue stream is. And even when you look at sort of the M&A in the event industry and the multiples that happened pre-COVID, everyone's starting to look for reoccurring revenue. That is what everybody wants. They want the SaaS model. And I like to remember that the original SaaS model was publishing. Publishing invented subscription marketing and subscriptions to get people that need a certain amount of information willing to pay for that information. And there's this great myth out there that people can't charge for information on a virtual event. A virtual event is another medium, another way to reach an audience. And you absolutely can, and people absolutely are. And in fact, you can do it in maybe one of the most profitable ways that exist, to be able to display content, connect people, create meetups, create more efficient commerce, and charge for that opportunity in a virtual event. So the doors are wide open as far as charging for the content if it's need to have.
Absolutely, absolutely. If it's need to have, and that's where the pressure's on, isn't it? To make sure that your content is need to have. Sophie, I'd be very interested also in hearing your thoughts, particularly on pricing, which is again a topic that comes up time and again when organisers meet. Pricing of delegate places.
Yeah, I think we've come off many years of this conditioning that things online are for free. So, why should you pay? Why should the organizer charge? But going back to RD's point, of course, about value, if you can create that perceived value, and there is a lot of noise out there. There are a lot of virtual events. So is that one way that you differentiate, that you have a nominal price? And if so, how do you do it? And the other things to consider, of course, if you don't charge now, how do you go back and charge down the track? Once you've established that, you're giving it away for free. And also, as you go physical and you want a hybrid event, what would be the incentive for somebody to come along to attend a physical event if you're giving most of the content away for free? So there's many different ways to look at it. And also, are you doing it as a data gen, a lead gen exercise to position your brand, or are you doing it as your main event? And perhaps one solution is that you have a tiered multiple ticket class. So you have one standard pass that's free, and that's basic entry. Then you have one pass that includes basic entry plus content plus on-demand content after the event. As we know, we're going very much towards the Netflix style, so you could include that at a nominal price. And then for a higher price, you have an all-inclusive pass where you get all of that, plus you get the networking, one-to-one, end of show reports, and so on. So you could tier it so you achieve both the data gen angle of running a virtual event and also then creating this additional revenue stream. And then to RD's point, you could funnel that up into your membership subscription community model.
Oh, it's actually great that you mentioned that, because yeah, we've my first two questions were literally around how to charge in a traditional way for the sort of things that you might have charged for in a physical event. But I know there's been a lot of talk around building revenue generating online communities off the back of successful events. And I wondered, RD, how would you go about positioning an event as the cornerstone of your community? I know you've got some interesting thoughts here. Perhaps you can share some ideas of some early adopters who've developed year-round engagement with their customers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, it all depends on what media assets you have to work with. And the answer, as always, is depends, right? It depends on where and how you're coming at it and what you're trying to accomplish. I've always been sort of that crazy guy in the corner at at the Diversifieds and the Tarsus saying, it's great that you have this live event. That's an amazing asset, but you can do all these other things around it. Today, we're doing virtual events because we have to. We will continue to do virtual events because we figured out that, hey, look at this. There's 4,000 people on this virtual event. Sophie and I and 2 other co-founders have formed a company together and never physically met, and we launched the Virtual Events Institute. The world has changed forever, and we will be using this medium in a much more a common way. I know it's been described as we've like taken a slingshot into the future. But so it really all depends on where you're starting from. If you're starting with a thriving live event, then you might start with maybe taking some of your need to have content. Maybe you put it into an online learning platform. That's a very a good element to be able to charge for. I love the comparison to Netflix too. Like, why do we pay for Netflix without even thinking? It's because we have access to this library of events where we can watch it when we want to watch it, however we want to watch it, and we can binge watch if we want as well. You might think about an online directory as a step. You might think of, as I mentioned, a job board. You might think of a pricing tool or a widget or something that's important to that community. I think what you'll see in the elements of all successful communities, and I'll get specific with one example, but I think you'll see that the community usually has some kind of gravity to bring in a free audience to bring them in, if you think of it as a funnel. And so lots of people are coming in because something is striking interest with them. And then that community model is trying to convert the free over to these value-added benefits within that community that they find out that they can't live without. Maybe there's some tools and resources. And my specific example is what we were able to do literally with a bankrupt publishing product with the Institute of Finance and Management. So it took this over in a private equity firm in America, and it was a newsletter for accounts payable and accounts receivable. Turns out there's 500,000 of them doing that job in America alone, and they didn't have any formalized education. They didn't have any professional home to go to. And yet it's a big profession being highly influenced by fintech and going through rapid changes and really affecting the modern corporation. It's where all fraud happens, is in the accounts payable area, or majority of it. So we created the Institute of Finance and Management from those publishing assets. Today, it is the certification program. It is recognized by Robert Half as increasing your salary. It is looked at by controllers and CFOs to help create a baseline of education. And so we went from a new print newsletter, a subscription-based print newsletter that was in bankruptcy, to a certification program, to live events at Disney and Vegas, to many virtual events, to an online membership with tools and resources in it, to white papers, to all these different elements. And now, if you're in that profession, you have to join that community. It's owned by Diversified Communications today, and it's a thriving entity. But that model, I think, is a very good example in an industry that you think, well, that's probably really well covered. Not at all. There's a lot of, I like to say this phrase, there's a lot of riches in the niches. And I know my British colleagues might call it niches, and I'm in New England, so I'm gonna totally destroy the word and call it niches. So riches in the niches. So find those niches and then monetize them, because there's a real interest in that.
Thanks, RD. That's very inspirational there. Yeah, just you need to look around a little bit, don't you? Riches in the niches, I'm going to say it too. Just before we go on to the next question, I just want to remind everyone, if you want to ask questions in a minute, please put them in the chat now, and we'll get to them after this next one. So we've talked now about developing the community from a user perspective, ways to nurture the community and encourage growth. RD just talked about that, momentum and reach. But for commercial organisations, the community will need to be monetised. And I wondered, Sophie, can you tell us a bit about how to do this successfully?
Yeah, so I think you can monetize communities both indirect, so you've got indirect revenue essentially, or direct revenue. I mean, to RD's point there about the momentum, the more you can create your community and the closer you get to your customers and the more customer touch points you get through this, the more you understand them on a deeper level. So you can create more value for them. You can translate their feedback, their thought leadership from the community back into your event. So the community fuels the events and the events fuel the community and so on. So you have this always on approach. And by doing that, you'll create more value for your customers. So they're more likely to become advocates, influencers or ambassadors, if you like, and they're more likely to go on and invite their contacts. So you really leverage the network effect. So they will go on and invite their contacts, and they're more likely to come back with a high annual recurring revenue. So even with your existing revenue streams, by building your community, you will essentially get more revenue from higher recurring revenue and through the new customer acquisition that you would get through the network effect. But you can also create a brand new revenue stream by introducing a subscription membership model, where it's a gated community, it's behind the paywall, could be a nominal amount, it could be a low yield, high volume model, where you essentially get some revenue, but equally then understand them more and funnel them up into bigger ticket items. But this new revenue stream, this membership subscription model, you could have it like going back to Netflix or Amazon Prime. You could even have an automatic renewal clause at the end of the contract, so automatically they renew for next year, so you can really demonstrate this high annual recurring revenue. And of course, all of this will then give you the content and the data and the insights and the momentum to ensure that your actual main event is as good as it can possibly be. So you essentially get it indirectly and directly if you get it right.
Oh, yeah, that's great insights. Thanks very much, Sophie. Yeah, quite a lot to ponder there. Thanks very much to both of you. I think now we'll take, there's a couple of questions in the chat. So if it's okay, I'll just ask, who was it? Kathy Fester, would you mind unmuting yourself and putting your camera on and asking your question? Because I think it was really interesting. Is that okay? You still there, Kathy? Yeah, cool. We can't hear you, Kathy. Can you hear Sophie or Ardy?
Sorry.
No. Okay, we can see Kathy. I'm going to ask your question, Kathy, because I don't know what there. We seem to have an issue with the sound. But Kathy asked, what is a going rate currently for an international summit format for this type of virtual event? A kind of ballpark range of price, because she said before COVID, they offered a tiered event, and she's not sure what to charge for a virtual. It's international.
So I love this question. And again, it's going to be the same answer. It depends. Because I'm going to give an analogy. I remember back in the directory business days, we would perhaps charge $300 for the directory of headhunters in America, something I was involved in. Yet for the two names that were very specific that you were looking for of the executive recruiters in the pharmaceutical industry in New Jersey, they would pay $2,000 for the introduction. So I give that as an example that it really depends. I know of organizations making an incredible amount of money, charging a low amount to a lot of people. And I also know a lot of organizations that are making a lot of money, charging a big amount to a very few amount of people. And I know that's more vague than the question was looking for, but it really does depend on what the need is, what problem you're solving, and then pricing that accordingly, just like a product.
That's great. Thanks very much, Ardy. I hope that was helpful, Kathy. There's another question just in this similar area. So Angie, if you're there, Angie Ahrens, perhaps you'd like to unmute yourself and put your camera on and ask your question.
Hi, everyone. I'm trying to get my video on, but it's not.
Don't worry.
Working.
Don't worry.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Oh, here I am. There we go.
Hi, Angie.
So my question is really about the monetization distribution of tickets. I believe that content has so much value, and that's why we pay for it. But is there kind of a bandwidth, a range of where the minimum and the high value is? Have you seen a trend in that kind of way of what to charge for ticket prices?
Going back to what we said, some people are, of course, charging nothing. They're very much using it, after last year and everything happened so quickly, and they just wanted to keep their brand alive and keep engagement. And they're also using it as a way to address a larger target addressable market and use it as a data gen exercise to use to funnel into the rest of the business. So there is a lot of that happening. But going back to what I said earlier, if you look at the sort of middle tier delegate price, we are seeing on average about $30 to $50 really, essentially, for that model, where you get the access to the event, but you also get access to the content afterwards as well. But again, it depends on, to Ardy's point, how big is that event and how many people are attending and what sort of size is the universe. But on average, that's what we would see, either people sort of charging nothing as a data gen and brand positioning exercise, or charging between $30 and $50 for that sort of package.
If you don't mind, can you expand on that on demand, how long that's being offered by companies?
So again, it's, sorry, Ardy, do you want to jump in?
Just, on the on demand, and I was going to say that anyway, that subscription model, like what if we start to think about sort of virtual events kick us into this way to think about, instead of charging for that event and that single thing, it's an element within a community, and you're charging a subscription cost or a membership fee to belong to that community, of which this virtual event is one of the deliverables. So, if you're, let's just say, for as an example, you might charge a $400 or $500 membership fee to belong to the community. This virtual event is one of the benefits of it. How much is allocated to that doesn't matter, as long as the benefit is there. So that was the only point I wanted to make. Sorry, Sophie.
No, that's great. Thank you. Did you have anything to add, Sophie? Because there's a load more questions in here, but
thank you.
You can incorporate the content into your community, to Ardy's point, and you can package it that way as a membership benefit, or you can have it for 3 months afterwards gated, and then people even who didn't attend the event can sort of devour the content and binge on it.
Okay. There's a good question here from Shiri Liram. Are you there, Shiri?
Yes, I am. Hi.
Yeah, it's a great question. Do you want to?
I can't start the video, but I have hopefully unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. Let me just find my question again. So I was asking, if pricing is very much focused on analytics, analytics for your audience, what are the best analytics tools you have come across?
Do you have some thoughts on this, Ardy?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the great things that's happened since, 10 months ago? There's a lot of bad things that have obviously happened because of the pandemic, but this idea that we've been in a slingshot forward. The platforms themselves have built in some fantastic analytics tools, as well as the entire cottage industry of analytics as well is just advancing. So I know there's a lot of, I won't mention specific vendors on the webinar just for the sake of that. But the platforms themselves, I mean, there's the 80-20 rule in analytics too. You get enough to be able to make a decision, but you could also spend your life, up to your neck in analytics. So the 80-20 rule applies in that if it can give you the detail that you need to be able to make a decision on how that person was reacting. A lot of the new platforms or advanced platforms now within virtual events software are including that.
That's great. Thanks very much, Ardy. Really useful. I can tell from all the questions around pricing that this has been a very practical session. So thanks very much, Sophie and Ardy, for your responses. There's just a couple of questions here around the community concept that you introduced. Maybe because we're running out of time, I'll just ask them. But the first one was, how can you map out your community ecosystem? Sophie, I wonder if you'd like to talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think essentially, take a step back, look at your current competitor and customer landscape. It may have changed a lot in the last year. As we know, there's been an incredible amount of disruption within events, an incredible amount of disruption in many industries. So really work out who your competitors are, lots of new tech players coming on. But in terms of your actual ecosystem of customers and the customers' customers, break it down into micro communities. Who are the core micro communities within your macro community? What's the sort of size? What's the sort of universe within each one? Who are the key players? And how are they all interacting within each other? And then delve in a bit deeper and work out who do you think is looking to spend the most money right now and promote themselves. Maybe it's a startup who's had great investment, or a new player has come in. And also then who's got the biggest voices within each of those micro communities that you could get on board as an advocate and, you know, get them to sort of shout out about your brand. But essentially take a step back and really do a deep dive into the core micro communities, maybe do a survey or some telephone consultation and really map that out, and then ensure all of the event team, you know, are aligned to this vision of what the current today ecosystem's looking like.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's just great insight. Thanks very much. I don't know if you needed to add anything there, RD. We've literally got 3 minutes, but
no, I think that was great.
That's cool. So with our last 3 minutes, so that we obediently stay to time, I'd like to thank both Sophie and RD for sharing your insights and ideas. And in the chat, everybody said really nice things about your sharing of experience. So we all do really appreciate that. Just before we finish, I'd like to ask you one last question. If you had one piece of advice to give to the attendees, something practical that they could go away with now, something they could do tomorrow, something that will have a visible impact on their revenue, what advice would that be?
So I'll jump in there first. I think there's never been a time. I mean, this is such an opportunity as big as the internet itself. I think that what's happened because of the pandemic and our need to react to it with virtual events, it has unleashed our ability to be able to try new things and do new things virtually and with low risk. So I would say be disruptive. So if you are a subject matter expert, this is your chance to just explore that micro niche and develop a community. If you're an established player, I would say this is the time to take risk and not the time to be complacent. Take risk, take risk with the brand, try new formats. Don't think of this as a single element, that one format. Don't define yourself as a format. Explore all these other formats in order to create a community and be disruptive.
It basically, quickly, you know, look at an event, whether it's a hybrid, live, physical, virtual, whatever you want to call it. An event is an event. It fundamentally serves two objectives, and the first one is to bring together and create a marketplace of buyers and sellers to do business and network. And the second one is it, you know, facilitates and creates a forum for content and learning and education. Those are the two core objectives, and any monetization historically and today and in the future will always be underpinned by those two sort of core objectives. So just think about that. What is it serving, and how can you monetize either business and networking or content and learning? And then just keep it really simple like that and build your pricing and inventory around those 2 points.
Oh, that's great, Sophie. That's a perfect takeaway. So thanks very much, Sophie and RD, and thanks, Stas. We're over.
Thank you very much. Brilliant session. I loved it and enjoyed it every minute. So thank you all. Thank you for everyone for joining up. You're welcome to go to the home area, and the next rounds will open. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Emma.